Almost 22 years ago to this day, a gruesome discovery would break the hearts of an entire family and shock an entire nation. On the 30th of June 2003, in a wooded area in the Scottish town of Dalkeith, the body of 14-year-old schoolgirl Jodi Jones was found. A young, innocent, sweet girl with her whole life ahead of her is not only found, but found by her 14-year-old boyfriend, who very quickly becomes the clear and obvious suspect in her murder. Over 20 years on, this is a case with still so many questions surrounding it, and this is a case that has been heavily requested by you guys in the comment section on every single video. So without any further ado, in today's video, we are going to discuss the tragic murder of Jodi Jones and the subsequent apparent trial by media of Luke Mitchell.
So what I would say about this murder of poor Jodi Jones is that it was incredibly gruesome and barbaric. And what we're going to try and do in this episode is go through the details of this crime and kind of try and piece together the untimely passing of Jodi Jones. In every episode, we will always try and do this as sensitively as possible, and this episode is no different to that. And also, we'll always try and honour her memory as well and pay our respects and condolences to her friends and family. Remember, we're just trying to piece together evidence as if any normal person would do. And ultimately, what Joey and I are going to try and do in this episode is try and find the truth. The most important thing is to try and find out what actually happened to Jodi Jones.
But just before I set the scene, I want to let these guys in on something that only me and you know. And that is that the Luke Mitchell case was one that we had vaguely heard of but weren't that familiar with. It's a Scottish case. It had been requested to us time in, time out. And we finally realised, right, we've got to cover this case. There is, you know, a lot of people that want this case covered high and wide, coming from all different parts of the globe. And when I started looking into this one personally, I was honestly gripped. I was gripped.
Can I just say,
case.
I was annoyed. Do you know why? Because I feel like more people should be talking about this case.
There you go.
And I'm very, very grateful to all of you that have suggested it, because it brought it to our attention. And having done the research like you, I'm so glad we're about to cover it.
Oh, honestly, yeah. And yeah, I think now it's something I'm probably going to develop a slight obsession in, to go in the obsession bank with Madeleine McCann and Jay Slater and everyone else I've got in there. But, right, I do think that the key thing that we've done with this episode that is going to excite a lot of people here is we always kind of discuss the episodes as we go, and we always say, okay, we kind of think this has happened, but, you know, we could maybe cross-examine this person and whatnot. We've done none of that. We've done no prep. I don't know whether you believe there is foul play in this case. I don't know whether you believe there's other suspects in this case. I don't know whether you believe that the man that was convicted is innocent or not. And the exact same goes from your standpoint, doesn't it?
It does. But I feel like in the course of doing this episode, it's going to be quite clear quite quickly the way that we feel about it, to be honest with you.
So let's get into it. So it's the year 2003 and we're in a relatively small Scottish town of Dalkeith, actually the birthplace of ex-Premier League winner Darren Fletcher. Now, to put it into perspective, Dalkeith has a population of under 15,000 people, whereas where I live in Epsom, they've got a population of over 80,000 people, and I don't feel like you can walk down Epsom High Street without everyone knowing each other. So in the area of Dalkeith, everyone knew each other. It was a very close-knit community. And within this community is obviously a young couple called Jodi Jones and Luke Mitchell. And as always in these cases, I think the most important thing to do here is to go to the victim itself. So Josh, why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about Jodi Jones?
So Jodi was born in 1989, which meant at the time of her passing away, she was 14. She was the youngest of 3 children born to James and Judy Jones. She lived in East Houses with her mother, her older sister, and her mother's partner, Alan Ovens. Devastatingly, in 1998, when Jodi was just 9 years old, her father, James, took his own life, and her mother had to stop working to take care of her children. Jodi was particularly close with her older sister, Janine, and their grandmother, Alice Walker. I think it's fair to say that Jodi was going through a bit of a rebellious moment in her life at this time as she was sort of becoming an early teenager. And in the month prior to her murder, her social life was heavily restricted by her mother because of apparent alcohol and drug taking that she was doing at the time. But on the day of June 30th, her mother actually lifted those restrictions and Jodi went to see her boyfriend, Luke Mitchell. So Joey, why don't you tell me a little bit more about Luke?
Yeah, so Luke was born on the 24th of July, 1988. Originally, his parents were together. They separated when he was around 11 years old, and him and his older brother would then have full custody with their mother. And it was said that they had a really, really good relationship, healthy relationship with their mother. Originally, Luke was said to be a smartly dressed kid. He attended army cadets, liked riding horses, motorbikes, and he actually did well in school. However, once moving into secondary school, Luke's behaviour started to change. He did start to follow more of a gothic trend in terms of dyeing his hair, often only wearing black, listening to that style of music, and also this is around the time when he started to use cannabis on a regular basis. It was reported that at school he once brought in a knife, showed another student it, and said that he knew the best way to slit someone's throat.
Reportedly.
So yeah.
We're just saying we don't know for sure that actually happens.
I could report that you could pull a knife out on me right now.
Yeah.
But you may not have done that. And we might have camera evidence to suggest that you didn't do that. Yeah.
If I was going to do it, I'd be doing it outside the cameras, Joe, you know.
There you go.
I know what I'm
exactly.
doing.
And you wouldn't need a weapon because you'd be able to just intimidate me anyway. just with these bad boys.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was reported, right? So you will hear the word reported a lot of times in here. Reported, yeah, and convicted, yeah, or proven are completely different things, by the way. It also doesn't mean that a report is necessarily untruthful.
Very true.
I'm just saying it doesn't mean that this actually happened. However, Mitchell was said to have developed an obsession with Satanism, and some people described him at school as becoming a devil worshipper. Now, Jodi Jones was actually in the year group below Luke Mitchell, but they started hanging around in the same places, the same spaces. They were actually, I believe, smoking a bit of cannabis together and stuff like that. And through that, they became closer and eventually entered a romantic relationship.
So I suppose this leads us to the point in which they have been basically dating for what, four months or so?
4 months, yeah. And to be fair, at 14 years old, that's actually quite a long time. My ones didn't used to last more than 4 weeks, let alone, 4 days after time. So they've been dating and they're known to each other. They're known to each other's families and stuff like that. And everything seems to be going well. No horror stories. We're not hearing anything like that. Everything's going quite well at this moment in time.
And that's really important to say. I don't remember hearing of any of the parents before this case being like, this person was a bad influence or we had a bad reputation of them before the incident.
Yeah, so say for example, we covered the killing of a young woman in Southport and her murderer, Lindsay Quay, her name was. Her murderer was a man named Mitchell Quay, and the parents featured in a documentary that we used as source material, and the parents said straight away, didn't like him from the second I laid eyes on him. I hated him from the second I laid eyes on him. There's none of that around Luke. There was no suspicion around Luke Mitchell, apart from the fact that he dressed in a little bit of a gothic way. Now, just before we speak about the events of the night itself where Jodi is found, during this time, you were at high school, yeah?
Yeah.
I was just about to go into high school.
Yeah.
a lot of people were dressing like that. A lot of people were getting eyebrow piercings, these little piercings here.
What do you even call that piercing?
I don't know. Something weird.
Yeah.
Nose piercings. They were dressed in like that.
This is the moment in your life in which you sort of form a bit of self-expression.
Yeah.
Before you get to like 13 and 14, your parents are kind of telling you what to wear, what to do. Whereas now you're sort of like forming your own identity. And this is where, yeah, like, mate, honestly, we'll go into this more later on, but I had lots of friends that were dressing exactly like this. I listened to exactly the same music. Do you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't call myself a goth, but I had lots of friends that were in this world. Maybe more so than you would, potentially.
Definitely more so than I would, but obviously I went to school with like loads of people like this. We used to do mufti day where you'd wear your own clothes and stuff like that. Yeah. What I'm saying is I know loads of people that were like ultra goth. Yeah, I'm on about like I went to an all boys school. Yeah, I knew blokes that would come to school with black painted fingernails and stuff like that, and that's like the ultimate sign of being a goth or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
There were kids in my school that had like thick shoes that had like studded belts that wore chains. Like,
yeah. I'm literally, the little chain things coming out, all these things, right? Every now and again, I see these blokes now growing up in the pub, just normal French crop haircut, probably reading a newspaper with a pint. They all grew out of it. Yeah, and didn't you just say that you used to dress a bit like this?
I wouldn't say I was like full black on black with all of the trimmings, but I had the haircut. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was in this world. For
and you haven't now.
What? As in, haven't got the haircut now.
Well, you haven't got the haircut. You don't dress like that now.
I don't.
So would you say?
I would say it might have been a little bit of a phase.
So would you say it was a bit of a phase that you grew out of?
I would say it was very much a phase.
And just a yes or no answer. Did you kill anyone during that phase you were in?
Not that I remember. No.
Okay, right. Let's move on to the night of the disappearance.
Okay. Jodi leaves her house at about 5 o'clock, if I remember correctly, doesn't she? And she says that she's going out to meet Luke. Again, no one is worried about this. There's no suspicions raised. This is all completely normal. And as I said, this was the first night out where she was actually let out of the house after a month. So you can imagine she was very happy about this. This was a good moment in her life. And so, you know, I'm sure she sort of gallivanted outside, you know, to go and see her partner.
And why was it that she was being kept at home for a month?
It was through drug and alcohol abuse, apparently. Apparently she was taking a lot of weed and drinking quite a lot for a 14-year-old.
One thing that I've found on a lot of cases that we've been covering, especially in like small town areas, a lot of recreational substance use and stuff like that going on in a lot of these cases, way more so than you would think. We sort of see these as like villagey sort of places, but yeah, there's a lot of a dark underworld, and I think as we go on to learn about this case, we'll learn about that even more so. But obviously once Luke then heads out, and Luke's heading out with the intention of meeting Jodi. He heads out gone 5 p.m, right? And he apparently meets up with other friends, but Jodi's not there, right? And the other friends can vouch for that. He goes and has a look. Jodi's not there. He comes home and he tells his mum that Jodi never showed up that night, being what the Americans would call grounded, you know, and she hadn't been allowed out for a month. I don't think that he was like distressed or worried or anything. I think that, and back in those days of technology as well, technology was there, but it wasn't iPhones. You know, we're talking Nokia 3210s and stuff like that. And most of the time, to be honest, we're just talking, I'll meet you at the park, aren't we?
Yeah. We're not talking about find my friend's iPhone. We don't know exactly where everyone is at every single second. And if she didn't show it, maybe the mum just said, no, we found something on you and you got another day of grounding. You know, that could be a realistic thought.
And back in those days, I remember, like, you know, you arrange a kickabout, two or three people don't turn up. You don't think much of it, not as a 14-year-old, do you?
No.
Really, right?
No, not at all.
And especially in a close-knit community like that as well. You're not in the middle of London. It's not anything too scary. Everyone knows everyone. It's not a massive raised for concern, right? And it's not until about 9 o'clock when no one's heard from Jodi. So by about 10 p.m, people go out and start searching for Jodi. And it's, again, I use the word reported. It's reported that the family organised search parties, and one of the search parties is 4 people made up, consisting of Luke, consisting of Jodi's grandmother, her nan, Jodi's sister, Janine, and Janine's boyfriend,
Stephen Kelly, his name is.
Stephen Kelly.
Yeah. They all meet up and they're searching quite, a distinct area. And again, what is very important to say, I don't know if you just said this there, but Luke also had his dog. Now, the dog really randomly was training to be like a search dog.
Very, very conveniently, if anything.
Yeah, very, very conveniently. So the story that we're about to tell is from the immediate aftermath, what the people that were around at the time said at the time and actually gave police statements. And the reason why I mention that, Joey, is that's important because those stories do actually change later on. So, Joey, have you been having a few random phone calls recently?
I've been having lots of them, yeah.
Well, don't worry, my friend, because it happens to absolutely all of us. And don't worry, there is a solution for this problem, and it is Incogni. And if you want 60% off an annual plan, just hit the link in the description and they can help remove all of that sensitive information from the internet. But you might be thinking, who actually gets this data? Well, it's data brokers, and they can get things like your name, your email address, even things like your political affiliation. And to have that information on the internet is very, very concerning. These data brokers actually take money away from people that can afford it the least. And so their practices are super, super sketchy, but there is something you can do about it. Incogni is a service which effectively reaches out to the data brokers on your behalf and actually requests that your information is removed from the internet completely. And it's all automated. So basically you don't even need to think about it and you can just let Incogni do the work for you. And with their new unlimited plan and custom removals, effectively what you can do is put a website in that you've seen your data on and actually get the service to remove that for you. So if you want to get this personal data removal squad and actually someone to actually help remove your name and your details from the internet, all you have to do is this. Hit the link in the description below, create an Incogni account and tell them whose data you want removed, grant them permission to work on your behalf, and then sit back and relax. They will keep you fully updated on the process along the way. Oh, and by the way, Incogni is totally risk-free for 30 days. So if you don't like the service, you can get a full refund. So take back control of your data today. All you have to do is use code Joey and Josh at checkout using the link in the description below, and you will get 60% off an annual plan. Thank you so much for Incogni for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back into it.
So shall I summarize the original police statement?
Yes.
Okay. And this was pretty much what all, and this is a summarization analysis basically of pretty much what everyone said. Okay, so they are walking down a somewhat of a country lane, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a rural, and it leads on to
like near a wooded
area,
yeah.
Right? And the dog all of a sudden alerts to a certain part of the wall where there's actually like a crack that you would be able to climb through in the wall. And the dog is it an Alsatian, I believe?
I think it's that sort of dog. And what I would say just before we go on to the next bit in terms of the scene, just remember, we're going to be sensitive to this, but this is quite serious, what we're about to describe. But basically, they see this gap in the wall. I believe Luke hops over the wall first.
So the dog starts barking. And Luke actually pops his head over the wall. Now, Jodi's sister, Janine, Janine's boyfriend, and Jodi's grandmother all initially describe Luke as coming back in shock and frantic and saying there's something there, we need to go. They hop over the wall and they tragically find the body of Jodi Jones. Now, she is obviously deceased at this time. She's to an extent, and we won't go too graphic with the details, but to an extent, she's been mutilated.
Significantly mutilated. Yeah, I think we'll leave it at this. The body was beaten. The hair was removed from the roots, like we're talking like incredibly aggressively pulled away.
To an extent, when you say pulled away, to an extent where she could have literally been swung by her hair, it would have been that aggressive. Yeah,
exactly. And it wasn't just that, her throat had been cut and slit like near enough 20 times, we've heard by the reporting. And also her left breast had been mutilated as well and removed. So quite a significant traumatic scene.
It's bad stuff. Now, on the night of the search, straight away after they find the body, they obviously alert the police. They are taken straight to the police station at this point. Interestingly enough, Luke Mitchell is the only member of that party to be forensically examined at the police station.
Now, forensically examined is a very important thing to go into at this point. The kid's 14. Forensically examined means stripped naked, clothes removed, all of your hands and everything searched, like under your fingernails. And so we're talking about quite an invasive process, and it's only happened to one person in the party.
Yeah.
Very weird.
So he's been forensically examined, even though the statements have already been given, by the way. The witness statements have already been given. And if you were to read those witness statements, you would have seen that, or you would read that Jodi's nan actually said that she touched the body. You know, she touched the body of Jodi. So another one you'd think, well, maybe forensic examination, maybe this might play a part. But I understand it. In the meantime, Jodi's body is actually left out overnight, by the way, before being taken away, which was really, really probably detrimental in terms of the forensics. Obviously, like when you see these things, they're always covered in a tent.
Yeah.
But you can't deny that weather conditions and whatnot, it's not.
I read that it actually rained that evening as well. So yeah, very, very bad forensics there, and also just very bad police practices, I think, in general.
Now, when Luke was forensically examined, experts that have gone on to study the case since, and even just at the time, came to the conclusion that Luke had not done a full forensic MOT washdown on his body.
No, what was quite clear is that he had dirt underneath his fingernails, which again is not that easy to clean off, but also if you were doing a forensic clean, you would want to remove dirt from your fingernails. And also, most importantly, his hair wasn't washed. Now, have you heard a lot of people talk about this? I think, again, what that indicates is that he didn't actually wash at all, potentially. Basically, he had greasy hair.
But I think the hair is the fit, like with the fingernails. You could have got them dirty. You leant up on a wall. You climbed over, walking through woodland, whatever. When you were looking for Jodi, for the extent of dirt and stuff like that was found in his hair, you could tell like it could be ruled out that he had not showered or anything like that day. Let alone, like, it might have been a couple of days, do you know what I mean? 14 years old, who knows what these kids are like. It's worth pointing out at this point here that certain DNA evidence was ruled out of being used in court in terms of, like, Luke's fingerprint, for example, being on Jodi and vice versa, because the couple were dating and they were affectionate with each other. So there was every chance that Eva's DNA could be on each other. However, if it was blood, for example, that would be completely different.
Don't you feel that there's a massive grey area about the forensic and DNA side of this case?
There is, but it can be explained also. So, like I say, because they were in an intimate relationship, they are going to have DNA on each other. Me and you aren't in an intimate relationship, but I guarantee you, if when we walk out of here now, right? Not even when we walk out of here now, I guarantee you that tonight, if the police bang through your door and done a forensic search and whatever, my DNA is going to be on you. Do you know what I mean? Because we've spent time together and whatnot. So there were two bits of DNA, right? And these were not used in court, but they were mentioned. And the reason they weren't used is because of the reasons we just said. They could be very, very easily ruled out. Now, there were two bits, but the papers and the media ran with this, right? And we'll get into their coverage a bit. But there were two bits, right? And they said that Luke's DNA was found on Jodi. There was a DNA profile that could not be profiled that was found on Jodi, right? And basically, it could have been one of any 9 DNA profiles, right? And the police said that they couldn't rule out that could be Luke, yeah? But there wasn't like a high enough percentage chance to go, yeah, the chances are that is Luke, yeah? Right? basically, for me, that's very, very wishy-washy. The other thing was that a bit of Jodi's DNA was found on Luke's trousers, right? And again, the media made this big thing of this. You're thinking like, oh, like what, the trousers he got on that day? They were found on a pair of trousers that were at his dad's house that he hadn't visited for 2 weeks. So not only is it not irrelevant, that is not newsworthy. And to know that the media made this big thing of this bit of DNA that was found on this, it kind of started to lead the public in one direction, in my opinion.
Ultimately, there's so many leaps in this case, aren't there? But I think what we should discuss next is the fact that what we described earlier on is a horrific crime scene, a body that had been incredibly mutilated. And so what you would expect in a killing like this is that there would be blood everywhere. And criminologists and crime experts have said this, and many documentaries about this case, is that the exsanguination of this young girl would have been everywhere.
It was a frantic, frenzied attack in which they believed Jodi would have lost about 6 to 7 litres of blood.
That's 2.
That's not 2.
That's 1.5.
That is 1.5 litre. Yeah? 1.5 litre. So we're talking 6 or so of them over. Yeah.
So what we're expecting now is that after forensically searching Luke, obviously what they found on him is copious amounts of blood.
Well, we're expecting a crime scene, mate.
Yeah.
We're expecting a fucking crime scene. We've got a body. Where's the crime scene?
Yeah.
But there wasn't much blood actually found at that crime scene. Did you know this?
No, go on.
There was a small amount of blood found on the wall, but there wasn't actually that much blood found
around the body
at the crime scene.
Really?
Right? There also wasn't any DNA evidence to link Luke to the crime scene, by the way. But
no, there also wasn't anything like footprints or anything like that, apparently.
No. But obviously, we know that the crime scene was tampered with. But yeah, you're looking and you're thinking, well, if it's Luke that has committed this murder, because it's easy to draw the line, isn't it? Jodi was on her way to meet Luke. Luke is her boyfriend.
By the way, the first person you look at is always the relationship, the partner at the time. So again, it makes sense for him to be the first initial suspect.
I mean, that's who I'd be suspecting.
Yeah.
That's who I'd be suspecting. Luke is also the one that has found the body.
Yep.
Obviously, we know from the statements that were taken, this is with the assistance of his dog, which is in essence like a police sniffer dog. But Luke's the one to find the body. So we can completely understand why suspicion was starting to fall on Luke.
Yeah, you could. But you also expect now to see defensive marks. Like basically in a frantic attack, you expect to see scratches. You expect to see damage on the potential attacker as well to identify that they've been in a very serious attack. But on Luke, obviously they've searched him, and so you tell me that they must have seen scratches. It must have been really obvious.
No scratches, no signs of any struggle, nothing like that. Nothing at all in the slightest. Obviously, you know, we said about Jodi's hair being pulled, stuff like that. None of that under his fingernails, nothing, right? So no DNA forensic evidence at all, right? However, a blood stain is found, and it's disputed quite a lot whether it's found on the t-shirt or the bra of Jodi Jones, right? It could have been found on both. It could have been one that had leaked through, right? Bloodstains there straight away. Who's the bloodstain going to be from?
It's obviously Luke. It's
clear. It's obviously going to be Luke. That bloodstain was from Stephen Kelly, Jodi's sister's boyfriend.
And obviously they forensically searched him as well, because, you know, he was with there in the search party. Like, obviously
no need, mate. They already done Luke. So they didn't search him. Didn't forensically search him. No. But there's a very key obvious thing here, is that what do brothers and sisters do? What do they share?
They share clothes. I'm sure that happens. You borrow a t-shirt here and there.
Yeah,
that's very normal.
And it was said and confirmed by family that the t-shirt that Jodi was wearing was apparently one of her sister's t-shirts. There is one thing with that for me. Jodi's sister lived with her fella 2 miles away. So wouldn't her clothes have been at her fella's 2 miles away? Not back at home where Jodi left from that day after getting dressed.
And also, would Jodi have put that t-shirt on? Like, would you wear a t-shirt with a blood stain on it? Like, if you, like, obviously you could put it on by accident and realise afterwards, for sure. But like if I've seen a t-shirt with a bloodstain on it, I'm not wearing that out of the house, am I?
No way. And especially, you know, like a young girl, you know, there's just no way. There's also a used condom found at the scene, right? That used condom is taken, it's tested, right? And they don't know who has used that condom. But when I say used, that is because there is semen in the condom. Now, one thing they can do is they can work out, and I think this is done on temperature. I think it is done on temperature because I know it from being drug tested for boxing, right? They can basically work out how fresh that urine or semen or anything that's come out of you, they can work out how fresh that is.
It also breaks down quite quickly, apparently, as well. So you can also do it chemically by doing that as well.
Now, when this was found, right, it was so fresh, it was deemed that it would have had to have been in or around the time when Jodi's murder had have taken place.
So obviously what the police do now is they take the sample there, they find the DNA, they run it through their system, and also they would run it past the suspects that they expect.
Yes.
I mean, that would be what police work would be.
Yeah. But they're busy, so they do that 3 years later once. Oh, we'll get to that. We get to that. But the condom didn't get dealt with until 3 years later. 3 years after is when they finally did that. There was also, just to let you know, police mishandling on the condom when it comes to the way that they handled it forensically, which meant that although they could test the semen, they weren't actually able to test the outside layer of the condom, which means they were never able to test whether or not that condom had been near Jodi.
I didn't know that.
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so not very good. Now, the press very quickly name Luke Mitchell, and they name him as prime suspect, basically. They plaster information about him, and I do say about him, you know, character references maybe given from people that may or may not have been his friends, may or may not have had agendas against him, may or may not. We don't know, right? But what I'm saying is they're not printing stories that are glowing about Luke Mitchell, are they? They are speaking about the fact that he is into Satanism, reportedly, devil worshipping, has an obsession with Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. And also, by the way, all of this press is going on. This is a 14-year-old boy that actually there isn't that much evidence at the moment to be able to have him anywhere near the press.
Well, regardless of evidence, by the way, Luke has an alibi.
Yeah.
Luke has a pretty solid alibi, right? And the alibi is that Luke was at home cooking dinner for his mother and his brother.
Yeah.
And both his mother and his brother can confirm this. They've both confirmed at the time, yet that is what happened. Should we talk just a little bit as well? Because when we're talking about the press and the press coverage of this, I think this is important. Can we just talk a little bit about his relationship with his mother?
This really pissed me off when I was reviewing this case, because what happened at the time, and you know the way that the tabloids are, they're trying to get anything salacious about this guy and try and run with it to make him look as bad as possible to sell newspapers.
As weird as possible, some might say.
Yeah. So what they said is that he was sharing a bedroom and a bed with his mother. And as I say, bearing in mind he's 14, that raised a lot of eyebrows and basically not only called him into question, but also the I suppose the mental state of the mother as well, and her ability to be a mother.
I read I was about to say a headline. It wasn't a headline. It was within an article, and I need to know what newspaper I read it in, but I was looking through the archives.
I'm going to guess it's the Daily Record, because a lot of the coverage from this case was from the Daily Record, which is a big Scottish newspaper.
It may well have been the Daily Record.
Yeah.
And it said that Piers described him as having a physically inappropriate relationship with his mother. And obviously, again, I think that comes down to sharing a room and stuff like this. Now, again, there's always context to these things. Like, you know, money doesn't grow on trees. This is a single mother that's raising 2 children. Maybe they did share a room.
Can I also just say there is even more context to this case, because this actually came out afterwards. Don't know how the people got this information from the first place, and it actually is a bit sick that they even know this. But at the time, Luke was sharing the living room with his mother, because basically what had happened was that he had been interrogated. He's been sort of like forensically searched by the police, traumatic. He'd seen his girlfriend in the state that she was as well. And so this guy was, to say fucked is not really an understatement. Like, he was absolutely out of it. He was stressed, anxious. He was having, flashbacks of this time. And so what had happened is he went to a GP after the interrogations, after he'd been with the police, and the GP actually prescribed him tranquilizers. The one thing that you don't want to do with tranquilizers is leave someone alone when they're on them, because quite frankly, I'm sorry to say this, but bad things happen when people are on tranquilizers, let alone if they get up in the middle of the night, stumble, hit their head, something awful could happen. So what was actually happening, and it's very important, I really want to say this.
Hold on. Are you saying that a mum was keeping a close eye and looking after a 14-year-old son?
Sharing two separate couches. So they were on completely opposite sides of the room, and they made out that they were sharing a bed. It's a disgrace. And also
basically at it.
Can I just say, this is not the first time that the media have warped a narrative to be something completely different from what it actually is. So yes, she may have been overprotective of her son. Yes, as a single mother, she might have really cared for him. But again, this is what every single mother does. You're not going to leave your kids alone when they're in that sort of state. So again, it's just a joke, mate. It's just a joke.
And again, I think to sort of cap off the point, this is the problem with, and there's two sides of the coin, isn't there? Like, we've covered cases where the media haven't named certain suspects and they've waited until they're of age and things like this. The problem with the whole trial by media is if you're in this period of time, and the first thing they've done is they've linked him to Marilyn Manson, right? What was the public perception, Josh, at that time of Marilyn Manson?
Oh, you want to get on to Marilyn Manson right now?
Just quickly, what was the public perception?
That he was a weirdo and also potentially involved in the occult and also potentially like interested in murders.
And if you were a parent, he was trying to corrupt your kids, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It was like you had Marilyn Manson on one side of the fence and Eminem on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
And either way, the parents didn't really like their kids listening to either or being obsessed with either, right? But Marilyn Manson was definitely seen as the darker of the two. So to be able to have very, very limited information on someone, but to draw up this character of this sort of suspicious, scrunger, goth-like character, these stories about him being violent and stuff like that. For me, personally, I think it's a little bit unfair that that's able to be done before a jury are going to look into anything.
Can I just say, on this Marilyn Manson point, it is fascinating to me because this is not the first time that Marilyn Manson has been involved and implicated in a criminal case. In 1999, Marilyn Manson's influence was directly cited in the Columbine murders, the school shooting that happened with Ed Harris and Dylan Klebold, where they murdered 14 victims in a school. They had said, the media at the time, this was the American media, that, bear in mind this is 4 years before the Luke Mitchell incident, they said that they were wearing Marilyn Manson t-shirts, they were inspired by his music, and that was a direct sort of implication in what they ended up doing. And Marilyn Manson actually did an interview saying that Columbine nearly killed his career. Like, it basically ruined his reputation to such a bad level that he basically nearly didn't make any music again. I just find it very, very interesting, Joey, that their music choice is even involved, not just from the media, but also as a character reference in the trial was even said, right? So again, we're talking about building a character picture based on someone's taste in music. Like, fucking hell.
That's how it happens, mate. What happened when me and you watched Breaking Bad?
Go on.
You started cooking, I started serving.
Yeah, it went straight to it.
Whatever you do, if you listen to rap music, you're a trapper.
Yeah.
If you watch a murder movie, you're into murder. You could be a murderer yourself.
Yeah.
If you listen to a musician that sings about doing drugs, then you're a drug taker.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not disputing it. I'm not saying that when a police, not newspapers, I'm not saying when the police look into things, they might not want to take these things into account. They might also want to look into other suspects, I think, but it's not, it's not something that is that relevant that I believe it should be making frontline, head sort of front page news.
Well, look,
press.
I think what is important about circumstantial evidence sometimes is that individual circumstantial evidence doesn't often mean a lot. We see this a lot in cases, but it's a collaboration of that circumstantial evidence that builds a sort of a story and a timeline of what you expect a certain person to do, right? But let's just go on to the concrete evidence next, Joey. Surely, now that the police have done all their forensic searches, they've found the body, they've done their initial police work, surely what we found is that there's an incredible amount of concrete evidence to be able to pin this boy to the crime. Is that the way it went?
No. There is not one bit of concrete evidence against Luke Mitchell. That's not in my opinion, by the way. That is fact. There's not one piece of concrete evidence against Luke Mitchell. So I'd actually like to know how they even managed to arrest him with the evidence that they had.
So basically, Luke at this point is effectively still a free man. We're talking still, the point in which we are at the case right now is the night of the 30th of June, the early morning of the 1st of July. While he's gone through and been through a police interrogation, at this point, he's not formally been charged. And at this point, while being considered a suspect, he isn't named as the suspect. So what I would say very quickly now is that this police interrogation that he went through was incredibly serious, so much so that a court of appeal later said that it was negligent and actually completely unfair. So much so, by the way, they actually broke his human rights. So that is how bad this police interrogation was. So there were a few reasons why that was the case. He wasn't given access to a lawyer. He wasn't allowed to have his mother present in these interviews. So the fact, like, those are two huge warning flags. Like, it's a 14-year-old kid. Obviously, he's allowed a lawyer. The only person that was in the room with him was a social worker. The social worker only said one thing, and it was confirm their name. So quite frankly, he had no support in a room. He had grown men shouting at him aggressively. There was even a story in which they took him to the toilet and they're still berating him while he's using the toilet and actually sort of like physically, over his shoulder.
They were basically saying to him, stop fucking wasting our time.
Confess.
Just fucking hurry up and confess to this and let's get a move on with this.
Yeah. And then the saddest part of this, and his mother's given a series of interviews after this, and she just said she saw him afterwards and that his eyes were wide as saucers. It looked like he'd been hit in the head with a mallet. He was, can you just imagine all the shit that this guy had been through at this time? And again, the key thing to remember is he'd just seen his partner in the state that she was. Mm-hmm. So let alone everything else, you can imagine how traumatic that was.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. I think that we do need to remember at this point still, despite us saying that obviously there is no DNA evidence, there's no forensic evidence, there's no concrete evidence. At this moment in time, we as the public, right? Because we're trying to, I know we're skipping back and forth, but we're trying to think in real time. We haven't been presented with any other potential suspects, anything else that could have happened. We probably don't know every detail. At this moment in time, I think if I'm a member of the public, just from reading the newspaper headlines and whatnot, and that's not to say that I'm not inquisitive and I don't question things and everything like that, but upon speaking to some Scottish friends I've got as well, right, who were talking about the case and remember the case, at this moment in time, everyone thinks Luke's done it. Everyone thinks Luke's done it. So that's bad police behaviour in what you're saying. But in terms of how the police are thinking, I think that most people, and obviously we've explained that this can be massively warped perception-wise by the way the media treat cases. But at this point in time, a lot of people are thinking that this young lad has murdered his girlfriend. And what you've got to remember, in the UK, we have a right to innocence until proven guilty. The case that I think is most relevant to me in this is the James Bulger case. Both of the kids in that case were actually given anonymity. Obviously, it was found out within Liverpool, who they were. But to the press and the public, they were given complete anonymity. And yet, this guy, Luke Mitchell, named in the press completely. So, for 10 months, this guy had to deal with the press abuse, like all of the stories written about him. Sky News did an interview where they're actually in his home as well, and very
aggressively interrogated him as well, really unfairly so, I think, and painted him out to be far worse than he actually was.
They said he was allowed back to school, but they actually never let him back to school. They had him stuck in segregated rooms for 8-hour days or something, not being able to mix with other students.
This interview actually came when they were doing a vigil for Jodi as well in their home as well. So they just completely taken the premise of what this was about and run with their own story to paint him as a bad character.
Can I ask you a quick question though?
Go on then, yeah.
On Luke's behaviour, Luke, to me, right, doesn't come across as, I don't want to use the word empathetic because that's not something that I can make a judgment on, but he doesn't, he's not welling up on camera. He's not crying on camera. He's not, it's not a dramatization. He's very, very calm, very relaxed. His tone never really changes that much when he speaks and things like that. And some people could describe that as someone who is kind of calm because they know they've done nothing wrong and they're guilty of nothing. But some people can interpret that in a different way. Some people can say, oh, you're cold, you're calculated, you're precise, and they're marks of someone that could potentially kill. So I think that there were a lot of people that are watching like the interview in question that you speak about and stuff, and they were thinking there's something not right about this kid. But at the same time as that, you can always look at the other side and say, well, this is a 14-year-old bloke with hardly any life experience. How do you know how you're going to deal with something at 14?
Do you know what? You and I are guilty of this as well. Like, we're normal people and we try and analyze body language. And I think the one thing that you can never really do is convict anyone on body language. People react to different situations in different ways. You never know until you're in that moment how you're going to deal with it. So I'm very sympathetic to him at the time, to be honest with you. Let's move forward to the moment in which he is arrested, which was on June 14th, 2004. He was actually arrested in his home. And perhaps the most interesting part of his arrest was that it wasn't just him that was arrested. It was both his mother and his older brother that were arrested and charged at the time with attempting to pervert the course of justice in connection basically to a false alibi.
The alibi.
Well, they described it as a false alibi, right? So they were, both sent down. We'll reveal later if that charge was upheld. But let's move on quickly now to the trial, Joey.
Yeah.
So the trial started in November 2024. It was at the High Court in Edinburgh. Luke was just 16, I believe, when the trial started. He pled not guilty, and the trial lasted, I don't know if you know this, the trial lasted 42 days, which is the longest single person trial, single accused, in the history of Scotland. So it's a pretty complex and detailed trial.
It is, however, and I want to get the word right, you might have to say it for me, deliberation?
Yeah, the deliberations,
did not last very long.
No, the deliberations last 5 hours total. That was across 2 days. And again, in the criminal justice system in the UK, what you want is a majority verdict. Usually it's 12 people on a jury. And so, a unanimous verdict, I should say. So you want a unanimous verdict. You want all 12 people on that jury to say they are guilty or not guilty and therefore off it. Unfortunately, in this case, the jury were not able to come to a unanimous decision. And it was actually a majority decision. Now, that can be 10-2. It can be 11-1. I think it has to be a minimum 10-2. But there wasn't a unanimous verdict. The majority decision was that he was guilty of the murder of Jodi Jones. And so he was charged with that murder. And he was actually also found guilty of supplying cannabis as well. And apparently, in the courtroom, Luke, much like you just said, showed very little emotion. Now, his mother actually afterwards said that he came out of the courtroom, broke down in tears and was absolutely devastated. But in the courtroom itself, he was very stoic, I would say. Now, the judge at the time sentenced Luke to 20 years minimum sentence of a life imprisonment term. So he would serve a minimum of 20 years. And he said this: "It lies beyond any skill of mine to look into the black depths of your mind. I can only look at what you've done. You've been convicted of a truly evil murder, one of the most appalling crimes that any of us can remember, and you will rightly be regarded as wicked." So with all of that in mind, with the statements that the judge has said, with the jury that has come to a very, very quick conclusion on what was a very, very long trial, I think what is clear to say is there must have been a case. There must have been a case that the prosecution built that convinced that jury that this guy was guilty.
Yes, there was. And there was three main sources of evidence, so to speak, that were able to convince the jury. The first of which, obviously, being, you always need to check underneath your feet. Usually, in these cases, 99% of the time, it's the person you're closest to. It's the person that you were said to be going to meet. It's the person that you were with. And with the evidence and the information that the court had been presented with at this time, which is very key in saying that man was Luke. That man was Luke. The last person that she was seen with was Luke, because there was a local woman, Adrena Bryson, I believe her name was. Now, she claims to have seen a young couple around the time of the murder. She couldn't identify the young woman that she claims to have seen, but she could say that she could describe the boy, right? She's then given, I believe, a lineup of images.
It was a set of photographs. Now, this is a very interesting part of this case in that these photographs, you expect them to be very similar. What happens in a lineup is you put people in a normal context, you take out everything else, and you make it so that they're all very, very similar, so that it's not easy to misidentify someone. Yeah. Now, in this lineup of photographs, Joey, there's 4x3 photographs, like basically like normal from a normal camera. In the middle of them, there's a Polaroid of someone wearing a forensic outfit. Do you have a guess who that person was?
That would probably have been Luke Mitchell.
It was Luke Mitchell, yeah.
So the woman then says, yeah, that's who I saw.
Yeah,
right?
So what happens then, obviously in the courtroom, she also has to identify that person. And obviously, she's picked him out from the lineup. She remembers the Polaroid. Obviously, she points straight to Luke.
It doesn't actually go that simple. In the courtroom, she is asked, is the person that you saw on the day of Jodi's murder in this courtroom, right? For context, this is the prosecution's star witness, and Luke is stood opposite her in the dock. She looks at Luke and she replies, no, I cannot identify
Joey,
that person in this courtroom.
That's case over. Like that is where you throw the case out. If that's your star witness and they can't even identify the killer, it's done.
But we still got to deal with the mum, because obviously very concerning. Why would the mum create a false alibi if he's innocent? Right? And obviously the mum's created this false alibi, hasn't she? The false alibi was that she was at home and the brother was at home upstairs. Now, obviously the original thing was that she was with him. She was in the kitchen. He was cooking dinner and the brother was upstairs on his computer, but he did say that he recalls, in his words, Luke down in the kitchen mashing some taters. And then mashed potatoes was apparently one of the things they had for dinner that night. The brother then actually changed his statement, right? And one of the reasons that the brother changed his statement was because he knew that the internet history was going to be searched and whatnot. And at the time when Luke was cooking dinner, the brother's upstairs watching blue movies.
Yeah.
We need to call it. Yeah. We can't say the actual name of the word, but yeah. Somewhere the gold shop you go to, something your rings. Apparently he's watching that, right? He's watching stuff on the computer. Not that he shouldn't be, he's, kid, whatever. What he then says is, that's not the sort of thing I would do if my mum or brother were at home, right? That's the exact wording, by the way. So he didn't then change his statement and say that my mum and brother weren't at home. That's not what he did. He never then changed his statement to say that Luke wasn't at home, his mum wasn't at home, whatever. They said, were you on the computer around that time? Because we can see your computer history, whatever. And he said, yeah. And he said, that's not, yeah, I don't know, because that's not the sort of thing I do if my mum and brother were at home. Fair enough. Maybe you might not watch that when your mum and brother were at home. To be honest, I used to. I still do when my mum's at home. But either way, what I'm saying is that was one of the things where the statements weren't sort of correlating with each other. However, He then goes on, the brother, to say that he suffers very, very badly with memory loss because of substance abuse issues that he's had in the past. Now, bearing in mind this court date is how many months, Josh, after
10.
the incident? 10 months after the incident, yeah?
Yep.
So if that's true...
Sorry, it's even more than that, actually. He was arrested after 10 months. So, yeah, even more than that.
Even more than that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if it's true that he suffers with memory loss due to the substance abuse issues, then do you know what I would do?
Come.
I would take his first statement as probably the most believable one, which is the one where he originally says he saw Luke downstairs in the kitchen mashing taters. Now, the other bit of controversy over the alibi was that a neighbour or neighbours of Luke Mitchell's, George Ramage and Nicholas Franklin, had both claimed to have smelt a garden fire coming from the neighbour's back garden. Originally, they'd saw a garden fire, by the way. Then they claimed to have smelt the garden fire. They said that this wasn't uncommon, as they did have garden fires regularly, barbecues and stuff like that. But Ramage stated that the smell that night was strange and didn't smell like food or like wood burning. Franklin, however, recalled smelling the barbecue just before 10 p.m, but could not remember anything untoward regarding a strange smell.
Can I just say, at this moment here, are these guys criminologists? Like, are they like sniffer dogs? Like, is that how good their smell knowledge is right now? You can literally just put your nose in the air and go, oh, do you know what? That's chicken. That is barbecue chicken. I can sense it straight away.
Well,
it's weird, Joey.
Again, this is the other thing. I'll tell you what else would be a bit weird. Very small sort of town, like we're saying. Now, Luke's mum denies having a barbecue that. She denies lighting a fire that night. Right? There were 3 forensic searches done of that property, right? And it was deemed that there was no evidence that there was a fire that night. Clearly, no evidence of anything being burnt. We've got a body that's been found. But what some people were suggesting was that there was a jacket that was burnt, that maybe had blood on it.
Potentially a murder weapon as well.
Things like that. Potentially a murder weapon. I don't. He wouldn't be able to, if it was a knife.
Yeah,
Things
exactly.
like that, you wouldn't be able
exactly,
to.
But as in, that's what they've proposed happens. Yeah.
Now, obviously, there is no evidence at all that any clothing was ever burnt. No. Not a shred of DNA evidence, forensic evidence, nothing. There's no evidence that any clothing was ever burnt.
Can I also just say, at this point, there's no evidence of any blood being in the house either. Any of Jodi's blood being anywhere near their home, around Luke's home at all. So there's, again, if you're going home to clean up, there'll be lots of evidence.
Why don't we look at it like this, right? I think I could give my theory here on why I think that this is a very, very unsafe conviction, and even that Luke is possibly innocent.
Okay.
Should I go with that?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So let's say that Luke did kill Jodi, right? How does he then get rid of any of the blood evidence of the body of a woman who, I'm sorry, has been butchered in the woods?
Yeah.
Because she's not found with 7 litres of blood around her, right? She's actually found with minimal blood around her, which is suspicious.
Yep.
Kind of makes you think, was she killed in that spot? When we talk about footmarks and whatnot, was she placed there? Was she killed in that spot? We don't know, right? But let's say he has. He has just killed his girlfriend in the woods, right? Now, the first point of call would be that he would go somewhere to clean up, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So forensic DNA experts said that jumping in the shower and using standard shower gel would probably not be enough to get rid of every bit of DNA evidence after a murder that horrific. So they're saying that even if he had a shower, he'd still have some DNA evidence on him because of the amount of blood and the way it was. It was a frenzied attack, described as. Not calculated, not, something from behind, someone in a hazmat suit or whatever. They're saying it was a frenzied attack, right? There would be DNA evidence. They're saying, forensic experts are saying, that they don't even think he's had a shower, let alone had a shower to be able to wash everything up, right? Also, when we speak about the house being searched, when we speak about the house being searched, do you remember we said that there was no DNA forensic evidence found in the house, right? And that is, a bit of proof in itself, whatever. we also spoke about the Ian Huntley case with Holly and Jessica, and his house was searched. And when they searched it, the forensic team said there's something wrong here because this house has been entirely wiped. We can't even find his DNA in the house. That was not the case with the Luke Mitchell house, right? There was no entire clean up, bleached house that the forensic team found. That wasn't it. Just a normal house that didn't have anyone's DNA involved, linking anyone to any sort of crime. So let's say, for example, right, he goes back there. What about clothes, right? Well, we know that there's claims he was wearing a coat that apparently burned. It was never proven. Let's say he was wearing a coat. Let's say he was. Let's really go out on a stretch. Now, this wouldn't hold up in a court, but let's say he was wearing a coat, right? Okay. Did he only get blood on that coat? Do you think 7 litres of blood were able to have been lost? 6 to 7 litres, and he's only got blood on that coat. White sands on front door, whatever. How does he get in the front door? How does he get in? Turns the handle. Probably puts his key in the door, yeah? Then how does he wash himself? Well, he probably turns on taps to either the shower or the sink or whatever. There would be forensic evidence within that house. And also, right, I just want to show you the escape route that, according to the police, Luke would have needed to have taken after committing this murder.
Yeah, what you got to remember, mate, is that this is a summer's evening. It's still light outside. People would be seeing something. Like, it would be very, very difficult to evade anyone seeing anything, especially when, quite frankly, you've been involved in a frenzied attack, you're covered in blood. That's the kind of thing that people remember, isn't it?
Yeah. And then also, when I'm giving my sort of case for Luke being innocent, another thing that I'll say is that 20 years on, this man still won't accept a plea deal. Right?
Yeah, and the context around this is he could potentially leave prison. Like, basically the way that parole hearings go is it's a good mark against your name if you commit capability, if you admit that you committed the crime, because then it's part of your rehabilitation. Still to this day, mate, says that he hasn't done it.
Yeah, I mean, the prison system is designed to rehabilitate, and part of rehabilitation is accepting your crime and coming to terms with your crime and improving with it. And if you can't accept your crime, then the prison system can't accept that you have been rehabilitated. So in a nutshell, had Luke pled guilty, in which year would it have been? 2004?
2004.
21 years later, mate, I'm going to call it for what it is. He'd have been out.
Yeah, he would have been out.
He'd have been out by
It was
now.
a minimum sentence, and the parole board, I mean, by all accounts, he's been very well behaved in prison. So, yeah, he would have been out.
Instead, he obviously pleaded not guilty and has had parole rejected 4 times since and still maintains his innocence.
Yep.
His mother also still walks pretty much those same streets with her head held high. She will not move away because she feels like she is adamant that her son has been framed. So she won't be shamed for something that she doesn't believe that her son has done. And again, like, we've covered cases on the channel of killers and criminals hiding in plain sight. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying these aren't usually the actions of people that are guilty.
And the key thing to say about the mother is that we mentioned this earlier on. They were charged with perverting the course of justice. That was never upheld. They never actually went to trial. They never were convicted of that crime. So again, in terms of innocence, both the brother and also the mother are innocent in terms of the eyes of the law as well. So I think that's very important thing to say about her character. And also, in all of the reporting and the documentaries that we've seen about her as well, she's had a really, really tough life. Lost businesses, lost her home, lost pretty much everything. By all accounts, doesn't have access to running water.
No.
So she's been dragged through a traumatic time in her own right.
So basically she lost her home, but she owned a caravan park, and inside the caravan park there's obviously always like a main sort of communal area. She actually lives in that, which is now abandoned. There's no heat, no electricity, nothing like that.
Weren't the caravans?
And the caravans were set alight, yeah. So very, very luckily, no injuries, no deaths, no anything like that. It may have been out of season, maybe when people aren't doing caravanning holidays. But yeah, the night of Luke's guilty verdict, coincidentally, all of the caravans are set alight for that caravan
Can
park.
I just say, this is why the importance of anonymity in cases like this is so good, and vigilante justice is so detrimental to society. If she had some form of anonymity, that may have never have happened. So yeah, it's just a disgrace. We need to do something about it, to be honest with you. I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to caveat this right now. I don't necessarily agree with these questions that I'm about to ask you, but I'm doing so for the betterment of a good video, right? Okay, Humour me for a second. So if we're going to go and play our way through the case and the fact that the jury did actually convict this guy, there must have been something to it. So just answer me these questions.
Yeah.
Why did the brother change his story?
Embarrassed about watching internet.
Is it that simple? Do you think there was some coercion by the police for him to change his story? Do you think the police got to him, interrogated him, say, we know what you've been doing, we know you've watched, change your fucking story?
Possibly, but I think it would be more so about, we know that you're involved in abuse, dealing, substance abuse, things like that. I think it would more so be like that, because obviously his original thing was that he gets bad memory loss from substance abuse. So you'd imagine still involved, and that's something they can usually get people on. So that would be my argument to that. But yeah, just maybe being embarrassed. You know, his family's been dragged through the headlines. He don't want to get involved. That's why he stayed out of the limelight since, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah.
She leaves her house at 5 o'clock. I believe they find the body at about 10 p.m., don't they?
Yep.
And I think the searches started near enough around, you know, that time as well. Very close to 10 p.m. They weren't searching for very long.
Searches started around 9
Yes.
p.m. I think Luke joined the searches about 9:35 or something like that.
So do you find, bearing in mind that we've seen a lot of cases where it's taken a lot of time to find the victim, do you find it strange that it happened so quickly and that Luke was the person to find her?
Well, I've got something for you that you might not know.
Go on then.
So the search party was the 4 of them.
Yep.
Did they all head out together?
Tell me, I don't know the answer to this.
No, they didn't.
So well, how did it go?
3 of them headed out together.
Okay.
The Nan,
Yep.
Jodi's sister Janine, and Janine's fella.
Okay. So Luke wasn't involved in the initial
Wasn't involved.
party.
Wasn't involved.
Okay.
Wasn't involved. They see Luke, he's walking one way, and he says, right, yeah, I'm going to walk up here. They're walking from another direction. And the Nan specifically tells Luke that they need to walk down this path, changing the course of the direction.
So Luke was trying to go another
Now,
direction.
Luke,
Yeah.
according to him, has already been, I think he's already been down there, right? Okay. He's already been looking about. So he's trying to cover ground he hasn't already covered, right? And the Nan specifically leads them down that path. That is actually what has been reported in witness statements, by the way, right? That the course of it was changed. Doesn't prove anything. You could even use it to use against Luke and say, oh, was he trying to lead him away from that? But if he had done it, he'd have known the body would have been found there eventually anyway. It's a tiny little town, and it's an area that people go to take substances and stuff like that. That exact area is known for that. So he'd have known people that have found the body anyway. So I actually find it quite funny that when you say, oh, Luke led him to the body, Luke led him to the body. Did Luke lead him to the body?
Yeah.
Did Luke lead him to the body?
Which,
because
by
some accounts, Luke was about to go and look in the other direction. The Nan is the one that redirects them, and then the dog barks, which in every original witness statement from the other 4 including Luke, is how it unfolded.
Can I also just say on this, I find it weird that those statements changed in such a diverse way, because what happens is if a corroborating story happens, there are elements of the story that all add up, even if some other elements change. But what happened in this case is the statements changed sort of very disparately. Like people sort of came up with different ideas of what happened on that night. The dog didn't bark. Luke was the one that climbed over the fence and showed them directly where it was. So again, in a court of law, you got to think about how all these things are working. So
the funny thing for me is, and in terms of key details, the statements that changed were always changed on one side. If you go the family of Jodi Jones against Luke Mitchell, it was always the key involvements and the key bits of statements that were always changed on the side of the family of Jodi Jones. Now, that is not to implicate anyone. That's not to suggest anything, but that is fact. That is fact. The facts are that the 3 witness statements that were taken outside of Luke on the night all said that the dog alerted and barked and jumped up against the wall, and then they all changed and said that the dog didn't do that at all, and it was just Luke that randomly went and popped his head over that wall.
Got it. So again, my next question on the relation of that, and what I will say first is huge sympathies to Jodi's family. They went through a horrible moment of their life and they had to see things that they should never ever see in a million years. And I sympathise with them hugely. And I think ultimately what they wanted is closure of the case. They wanted to find they wanted to find the perpetrator. They wanted to end the trauma, right? So I'll say that. But all of her family, mate, insist to this day. Bear in mind, they went through the trial. They went through everything. They insist that Luke is guilty. How can you explain that?
I think maybe we should start to get into some other suspects, and that might help us explain.
Go on then, let's do it.
Right, so I'm going to start off with a man named Mark Kane. Mark Kane lived directly opposite the field where Jodi was found. That meant that if he was involved in the crime in any capacity, he would have had an escape route, so to speak, and it wouldn't necessarily have been one like Luke's potential escape route that we showed you on screen earlier. It would have been one where the likelihood is he wouldn't have been seen. Now, he is a man that was reportedly known to be a violent man around that time, a substance abuser heavily, apparently, at that time, one that was known to carry weapons, and he actually turned up at a friend named Scott Forbes' house the following day. That day, he had red eyes and scratches all over his faces. Scott Forbes' girlfriend asks him to take off his glasses so that she could see his face properly. And apparently they both say, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Oh, I was down in the forest." And he said, I was taking X, Y, and Z. And he said a real cocktail of
substances.
Yeah. And that he fell in a bush and done it in a bush. And Scott Forbes actually says to him, "They're not marks from a bush. They're not bush scratches and whatnot." And obviously by this point, people know about Jodi.
Yeah.
And he asks him about it. And he just basically says that Mark Kane goes pretty quiet on the situation, doesn't engage, doesn't want to speak about it. And most frustratingly, at the end of this, we find out that Mark Kane actually passed away last year.
Yeah, and that's the only reason why we actually can even name him, really, in connection to this, is because, yeah, he has passed away. So if it was him, we won't get any real justice from it.
Yep. Now, the second set of suspects were known as the Moped Boys, Gordon, Dickie, and John Ferris. Now, numerous witnesses say that they were in the area riding round on their mopeds at the time that the police say that Jodi Jones was murdered. Now, one of these mopeds was reportedly seen leant up against the wall where the V in the wall, which obviously shows, where the dog alerted to, one of the mopeds was leant up against that wall. Do you know what time the moped was leant up against that wall?
Was it near enough the time in which people think she was murdered?
It was 5:15. It was 5:15,
Yeah.
which suggests that moped was leant up against the wall. By the way, there was multiple witnesses that saw this, not just one. Multiple witnesses that saw the moped leant up against that wall at around 5:15. So if Jodi was murdered at 5:15 p.m, and the moped was leant up against that wall, she either wasn't murdered there or they were in the same place as her. They were in the same place as her because the moped was leant up against it. Unless they randomly leant their moped up against the wall and went off and walked off somewhere else. Police immediately appeal for these moped drivers to come forward. However, they don't hear anything, right? It is actually 5 days before any of them come forward. Now, I understand, right, that things might slip through the net. Like, let's be honest, right? There's a lot of like substance abuse and substance taking here, right? Sometimes hours can turn into days and days can turn into 5 days and you've been on a 5-day bender and whatever, okay? Maybe you haven't heard about stuff, maybe whatever, maybe you haven't heard, but this, I call it a town, mate. Epsom's a town. That's got 80,000 people living in there. Like, this one's got about 12,000 people. If anything, it's almost like a large village, to be honest, yeah? Now, I'm of the belief that these guys on the mopeds would have known about the crime. They would have known about the murder. They would have come forward straight away to just rule themselves out, right? But we give them the benefit of the doubt. They could have been getting on it. They could have been somewhere. Or they could have just not heard about it. Like, they might not know Jodi, yeah?
Yeah.
But what about then if I tell you that John Ferris, who is one of the moped boys who came forward 5 days later, is Jodi's cousin?
It's wrong, isn't it? This is so strange, because not only would you know about it, you immediately want to try and help. And he didn't come forward for 5 days. I can't believe that.
5 days after the murder of your cousin, in the same spot where your moped was seen leaning against the wall. You don't come forward. Little bit of trivia for you. When he does come forward, what has he done that is out of character?
He chopped off his hair, but apparently he did. Like, when I first heard this, I thought he was like shaving his head. Apparently he just chopped it off with like some scissors. Like,
mate, he gave himself a homemade buzz cut, basically, right?
Weird.
He gave himself a homemade buzz cut. Now, do you know why people normally do that?
To change the way you look so you don't get identified, potentially.
Not so much.
Go on.
Not so much, because let's be honest, if he was on a moped, he could have had a helmet on. So
Fair,
he might not have known about what his hair like.
Oh, go on then. What's the reason?
Like. Anyway, get rid of evidence. Get rid of evidence.
You think it's DNA?
Why do you think Britney Spears shaved her head all them years ago?
Yeah.
Why do you think like people do this? People do this. Like he shaved his head, right? Potentially. There's the potential, if we're talking about suspects, and this isn't me saying this guy did it and this guy whatever. We're talking about potential suspects. I'm looking at that guy and I'm going, that's weird that you're not shaving your head all the time and you've randomly shaved your head and then came forward 5 days later.
And bearing in mind,
deceased.
Luke is convicted on a circumstantial case. And what you have just described, I think, to me, has more weight to it than the entirety of the Luke Mitchell trial.
Mm-hmm. Now, he was questioned and asked in court whether he was involved in the murder. This is John Ferris, obviously Jodi's cousin. He actually admitted to being in the area at the time, yet claims he never saw Jodi and therefore didn't murder her. Now, I'm not being funny. If you were in the area at the time, there's a struggle going on by all accounts. Would you not have heard something?
Definitely.
Would you not? I don't know. I find it very, very hard to believe. And the fact that it was his family is a strange one. Now, do you actually know, right, one of the reasons what took him 5 days to come forward?
No, tell me. It's
reported that Jodi's nan, who was the woman who led Luke down the path and whatnot, it's reported that Jodi's nan, reported, it was put in a statement. By John Ferris, that Jodi's nan said, don't go forward.
Why?
I don't know.
That is not good.
By that point, I suppose suspicion had already fallen on Luke Mitchell. Maybe she thought that they had their man and she didn't want to complicate things anymore and whatnot, and therefore didn't want to waste police time. Let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Should we talk about Joseph Jones? Do you know who Joseph Jones is?
Another relation, apparently.
Joseph Jones was Jodi's brother.
Yeah.
Right? Now, why would Jodi's brother be a suspect? Right? Because we haven't even spoke about Jodi's brother.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
We haven't even spoke about Jodi's brother, right? He was actually friends with the moped boys, right? He was alleged to have bought quite a lot of substances off of the moped boys. And actually, it was said that in the days before the killing of Jodi, he was smoking quite a lot of those substances. Those substances in particular were said to give him very, very bad paranoia that apparently makes him violent and frantic. Now, why is any of this relevant? Why is it relevant? Why is it relevant whether or not he had some substances in the days before reportedly that made him violent and frantic? Because the attack, right, is described by experts as a frenzied attack rather than a calculated one, meaning that it's more along the lines of someone who's just lost control in an instant rather than a serial killer, for example, right? But again, why would Jodi's brother want to hurt her? Why would he want to hurt her? Why?
Come.
Because he already did.
What? In what way?
5 weeks before Jodi's death, Joseph Jones is sectioned under the Mental Health Act after reportedly battering Jodi, right? The attack was random. It escalated quickly, and it apparently involved Joseph swinging Jodi round by her hair. Now, what did you say about Jodi's hair when her body was found?
Effectively pulled directly out of her head and the roots removed from the hair.
Not only that, Joseph, her brother, right? He's living in the area. He's in the local area, a very small area, right? Yeah. Didn't attend a single search party. He actually changed his witness statement about the time he was home that day once police gave a time frame on what they believed was when Jodi was murdered. So after that, he changes his witness statement. Now, obviously, I understand that it's a very sensitive subject. Some people don't want to look their families, killers in the eyes, things like that and whatnot. But members of the family were at court on both sides. Joseph, Jodi's brother, he never turned up to court. Never to any hearing. Never to any hearing. And not only that, right? One of the last sightings was of Jodi being followed by a larger sort of thick-set man, right? That's confirmed sighting by a couple of people that they saw Jodi and walking behind her was a larger thick-set man. Now, that is not in line with 14-year-old skinny, blonde, curtain-haired Luke. It's more in line with Joseph Jones. And one of those members of the public that reported that they had seen him, they were watching coverage or saw pictures, I believe, of the funeral and reported again to the police. That man at the funeral, which is Joseph, her brother, is the man that I saw walking directly behind her that day.
Jeez.
So the police had that information and for whatever reason decided that they didn't need to act on it, I suppose. Now, let's talk about Stephen Kelly. Stephen Kelly, Janine's boyfriend. Stephen Kelly was immediately ruled out because although his DNA was found on what some people say was Jodi's t-shirt, what some people say was Jodi's bra, what some people say was both, they easily explained it that obviously he was her boyfriend and therefore his DNA could have been on it because it was Jodi's sister's clothes, Janine's clothes, apparently, right? No confirmation of this, by the way. We've got no receipts, no nothing like that, whatever. As we say, they were living 2 miles apart, so quite unlikely. And as you said earlier on, if there was a blood stain on a bit of clothing, you probably wouldn't, wear that out, would you? Yeah. Not only that, his first statement, Stephen says, Luke's dog Mia was sniffing the air and alerted to something. But in the second statement, he said, the dog had no involvement and it was just Luke that walked to that spot.
He's changed the story completely.
So have many of them, my friend. Now, finally, let's just quickly talk about Condom Man, because obviously there was a condom found at the scene, fresh semen in it. The police didn't actually think it was all that significant. They didn't think it was all that significant that a condom had been found at the scene of this crime that had happened, and they had accumulated that because of the semen and how recently it had been released, they had worked out that it would have had to have been around the time of the killing if the killing took place there. So whoever did that would have had to have gone in there. Now, they actually tracked down the man. They never named him. He said he used to go into that wooded area. He was a local man, lived nearby. He said he used to go into that wooded area and knock one out because he couldn't do it at home, basically.
Yeah, no privacy at home, basically.
Do you know what he said?
Come.
He said he went there and did it on that night at around 9:30, and it's still broad daylight. This member of the community who's never been named, he didn't see Jodi's body there.
Weird.
There's holes everywhere.
There's holes everywhere. Yeah.
There's holes everywhere.
Yeah. It's not right.
It's literally ridiculous. So yeah, there's the list of suspects for you. But can we quickly talk also about the lie detector?
Yes, this is an important part of the case, wasn't it? So basically, when you conduct a lie detector, there's an element, if you sort of say to yourself, you say, I'm going to conduct this, there's how true is it going to be? Like, you're conducting it, therefore the person's working for you, so it's not legit, etc., right? But in February 2012, a reporter goes to Luke's mother and says, look, if you're innocent, why don't you do a lie detector test? And what we can do is prove your innocence. Now, again, what's clear to say is you can't, like, polygraph tests are not permissible in a court of law.
No.
Like, you can't use that as evidence. You can't prove someone's innocent or guilty.
Not anymore. You can't. Not in the United Kingdom.
And previously you could. Is that why you're saying that?
They still use them as key parts in certain states of America and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, and again, what's clear to say is it's not always 100% accurate and everything like that. So,
Of course.
the journalist does this. He says, whatever the results, I am going to publish this.
Yeah.
So she gets videoed, she gets photographed, the written journalist is there. So there's a huge amount of pressure. And also, if she is involved in any single way, they're going to find out. Like, there's going to be questions asked. Was the alibi truthful? Did you know that Luke did this crime? Right? And so they ask all of these questions. And what happens?
She passes with flying colours.
Joke.
Now, let me just give you a few cases. Mitchell Quay, one of the killers that we spoke about on this cover, he refused to do a polygraph test. Within his rights to do so. Why 100%. Do something that isn't 100% accurate? I understand that. He refused to do it. Ian Huntley, he didn't refuse to do it. And his polygraph came back awful. It came back that he was lying on everything, right? Again, because they aren't admissible in court and they're not used in court, we understand that, okay, they can give you an indication, but they can't give you the whole way there. Now, there are circumstances to it. So say, for example, if you asked two people that have not had a chance to basically, be prepped on what questions are being asked and stuff like that because they weren't between the two, if you ask two people, that then heightens the chances or shortens the chances of a polygraph being accurate, right? So what I'm saying is the circumstances that these polygraphs were taken in made it very, very hard for them to not actually be accurate, because it's not like Corrine on her polygraph got some wrong, some right, some wrong, some right, and therefore you can cast out. She was deemed to have answered every question truthfully according to the polygraph, yeah? So they included questions: were you involved? Were you with Luke? Have you lied for Luke? Did you burn any evidence? Has Luke admitted to you that he killed Jodi? And she answers all questions in accordance of basically, no, there's been a miscarriage of justice here, and the polygraph comes back correct. So what did they then go to do?
Yeah, this is really interesting, actually, because it didn't just stop there with the polygraphs. They actually go to prison, and Luke himself says that he will do a polygraph test. And again, what happened there, Joey?
Well, once again, it comes back that Luke is apparently telling the truth on his polygraph test. Now, again, there are certain ways of avoiding detection on polygraph tests, right? But what is way easier than to avoid detection is to catch someone trying to avoid detection, yeah? So say, for example, in the Chris Watts case where he had murdered his family in America, they used a polygraph test on him and they had to stop it at the first attempt because she said, Chris, your breathing is all over the place here. Like, I need you to calm down and whatever. He obviously knows he's going to get a polygraph test, Chris Watts, right? And he's Googled how you can make a polygraph test come back inconclusive, because you can do that. And there's certain breathing patterns. It's actually to do with rehydration, drinking water, things like that. There's ways you can do it, right? And that doesn't mean there's ways you can pass one. There's ways you can make it come back inconclusive, i.e. this person, the way that we measure it, this person's not letting us measure it, basically, and therefore we can't, we can't conclude anything. Luke Mitchell's comes back that he's 100% answered everything accurate, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And this is the thing. We've heard clips from Luke in prison, and what he's always refuted is his innocence. And he has had every opportunity to both get out of prison, do everything he possibly can, just by admitting guilt that he didn't do this. That he did do this. And the fact is, he still to this day says, I didn't do it. I'd rather rot in prison for the rest of my life than admit to something that I didn't do. And I admire his commitment to be able to sort of say that, because I know a lot of people, I mean, fucking hell, mate, 20 years in prison. There'll be days where you go, do you know what? If I just fucking say I'm guilty, all of this pain ends.
I know people that have taken guilty pleas for stuff they ain't done. And I'm not on about I know loads of people that have taken guilty pleas for stuff you ain't done. Yeah. Because sometimes you take a guilty plea for something you ain't done and you get even less time than you were going to get before you even got offered that guilty plea. Do you know what I mean? So you would have done it. You wouldn't done it. Which leads me to a conclusion, right? So here's the first question I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Knowing what we know, do you believe that this is a safe conviction on Luke Mitchell for the murder of Jodi Jones?
No, I think the trial and the police work afterwards, which again, as I say, clearly said that they broke the Human Rights Act to be able to do that interrogation, means that that evidence and therefore the trial itself was impermissible. I don't think it was a fair trial.
However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't think that Luke did it. It means that, you know, if you were presented with new evidence that actually did, you know, incriminate Luke, you could be open to it, possibly. Do you think, your gut instinct, that Luke did it?
I don't think he did do it. No, personally. I don't. Do you?
I don't think he did do it.
No,
I don't think he did do it. But it's very, very hard for me to say that knowing that Jodi's family believe he did do it.
This is
and knowing that Jodi's family probably in some way want to believe he did it, because obviously then it gives them the chance of closure, which is exactly what, you know, you would want them to have as a family. And I understand it, right? You were in a situation with me very recently where I had to identify someone at short notice and there was a bit of a crisis thing, and I convinced myself straight away that it was one bloke, and I was saying to you, it's fucking, and it wasn't. You knew it was,
yeah, and it wasn't.
It wasn't. I was wrong. I was wrong.
You made a mistake.
I made a mistake. I was wrong on it.
From a grainy picture,
From a grain, and sometimes what people want to do is they want to draw a conclusion straight away and go, right, okay, the shoe fits. However, this is where I'm going to really upset people, and I'm sorry, man. I'll always hold my hands up. If I give an account of my view on something and I've come back and it gets proven wrong, I will hold my hands up and say I'm sorry, right? I do suspect the family. I do suspect that the family know a little bit more than they're letting on, right? Yeah. And it comes from a few things. It comes from the nan obviously altering the pathway that Luke was walking on that day. That's not that significant for me, but that plays into it. The nan apparently, and in a witness statement from the witness, the nan apparently telling the cousin of Jodi to not go to the police, that concerns me massively, massively as well. The fact that Jodi has a sibling, a brother, who was sectioned after a physical assault on her less than 2 months before her killing worries me massively. And the fact that DNA of the sister's boyfriend was also found on her when they don't even live in the same house massively concerns me. Concerns me. So what that leads me to believe is that there's more at this moment in time that links the family to it than that links Luke to it. But I could very much be wrong on that. And that is why we always say the same thing with this podcast. We're two mates that will sit and we'll give our unbiased views and opinions on cases, and we'll try to tread water lightly and not offend people too much in the interim, but at the same time, you know, be honest to ourselves on what we believe of a case. And we're not saying that, or say, for example, I can only speak for myself, I'm not saying this to sensationalize a podcast and go, this bloke's behind bars. No, I'm saying it on the evidence that I've been presented with. I don't think that he has been trialed fairly, and I don't think it's a safe conviction.
The one thing that both you and I want here is to find out the truth. With these cases, the only thing that we really ever care about is understanding what actually happened in that time. And if that raises some suspects and some incidents that other people might not want to talk about, then that just is what it is. Ultimately, the work of the police and the law, you hope, is to identify the right person. And I find cases like this, and I'm glad we did cover this case, I find cases that are miscarriages of justice or perceived to be miscarriages of justice the most egregious, because there's two persons that are hurt by this. There's the person that is obviously in prison unfairly and their name has been tarnished and their life removed from them. But also there's someone in the community that is out there at large that might still be a danger to other people, even 20 years later. So I think, you know, the police and the judicial system have a right to be able to find that person that actually did it. And so let's hope it is Luke, because if it isn't, that is a scarier situation for the rest of the world.
And once again, I'd like to say, I don't hope that it's the family. What I'm saying is I believe that there needs to be more questions asked more questions asked and more investigation, rather than certain people going missing for 5 days, going missing for the trial and this and that, and it not being looked into, and no other evidence or no other suspects being given in the trial for a jury to be able to even ponder the idea that something not in line with this invisible painting we're doing for you right here actually happened. But listen, who knows? I'm sure it's a case that maybe one day we'll revisit, and it's one that everyone, I think, will have their opinions on. So we're really looking forward to hearing those in the comments section below. Obviously, give us a like on the video if you enjoyed the content, and let us know what case you want us to cover next time, because once again, this was a suggestion from one of our members, actually from loads of our members. So thank you very, very much. And as always, condolences and thoughts go to Jodi Jones, who tragically passed away way too young, and her friends and family and anyone that was affected by her murder or by this episode.